do some of the scratching of the overhead. This is the first layer, and so just using little tiny bits so that we can apply the pressure needed to get that pushed up through the lath, so it's gripping all those little fibers, bend around the corner, and it holds. If I didn't push it in hard enough, then when I go to thicken it up, the gravity will pull it off. So just doing smaller amounts so that you can be sure you key it into that lath. And just real thin, doesn't have to be thick at all. That'll make your second buildup layer, which is going to be like this, an inch thick. It'll make it stick. But when you do put your second layer on, putting very little pressure, you're just laying it up there. And you're not trying to smooth it out. You want to just try to get it in one pass. If you have to make another pass on your follow-up layer, just do it very lightly. So this has about 18% aeration for the overhead. Going a little lighter, still going to be around 11,000 psi. For the overhead, yeah, we use a little extra foam, so it does help it stick and to be able to put on heavier layer. And we're putting in a little chain so we can hang things. So that's the press in layer, and now we're going to load it up with the second layer. It's just good to stir up a little bit smoother, make sure the plaster's pretty soft. Add a little bit of water, do that on your trowel so you don't have to. So it's not just a few drops. This has the water reducer, so it really responds to a very small amount of water. And then the second layer, you can go ahead and put it on a little thicker. And just try to get it as few as passes as possible, pretty light. So I have my other shell so I can kind of gauge the thickness of it. Not trying to smooth it out, just trying to put it on. With the exception of a, very high trowel ridges, you can go back and hit them because you'll be able to smooth it out as light as a feather. So you're not disturbing that coat that you put on that's adhering, because if you press on that, it'll cause movement on the lath. It'll kind of waller out of space where it's touching the lath, and then you have gravity working against you as well. And then every once in a while, if you're not sure about the thickness, you can gauge it with your trowel. So there's no thickness there, so I know that part is not done. And I can see the other plaster. Just look for your low spots and fill it in without trying to over trowel it. You're just placing the material, because you'll have a chance to smooth it in once you put your glaze coat over that, which will soften the top layer with the acrylic. It's the Acryl 60. So I think I got it covered. I'm just looking for the low spots to fill. It's pretty thin there. That's very thick. And if you're having to put a second more on top of what you did, just use tiny amounts so you're not having to press too hard. Okay, I did my press in layer, which was pressing it into the lath to give it that nice suction, very, very thin but covered. And then the layup layer I laid on real softly with just one pass and left it super rough. And then we put the acrylic, which is about 50% water, 50% acryl 60, and just we're not trying to make any finish. We're just trying to get the material on to the surface. Just get it coated. Try not to let it run down your glove when you're doing overhead. So it's a lot of dipping and brushing your layer. I've made the edges nice and thick so they won't dry out. This is about 1 inch thick overhead plaster. And it sticks because it's an aerated cement. It has closed spherical cell aeration, which is a lot different than air entrainment. And this is the acrylic seal that basically makes it like a pond plaster, or like a aquarium plaster, basically. You can have living fish and it won't leach anything into the water. So when you do your layup layer or your second layer, you don't try to make it pretty. You just try to make sure you have enough thickness and get the material on there. Put some on your trowel and then very lightly smooth it out, because any pressure that you're putting on causes the underneath to move. It will cause it to fall. So I'm just skimming this over the surface real lightly without thinking about, am I causing any movement down below. And just smoothing that out. You can just push it around, fill up any little extra. But you don't want to push it too hard. And this is the layer where you pretty much get your smoothing finish. But again, you're just using that soft upper coat that you just softened with the acrylic seal, the acrylic glaze, the acryl 60. And you're using it to cover up your holes, get the geometry without putting too much pressure. Since this is you don't have to keep going over it. Try to minimize your passes. A dry brush finished over your trowel finish. Tap off any excess acrylic, and then just brush out a nice, lightly sanded finish. Not too sanded, because if you sand it too much, it's going to take a lot of paint to seal it. Just a nice. Sure and feather in your seams, brushing the wet out onto the dry. There, and that's it. Overhead plaster.